to my first episode of Sensitive Not Soft in 2026. If you're wondering why I look like a detective from NYPD Blues, some kind of like 90s detective show, it's because I am a loser of things. I have to have man purses, fanny packs, something over me to hold my things. Otherwise, I set them down. And I found this one on TikTok. Even though I look like a 90s detective, I love it. I think it looks cool. So I'm going to be rocking this thing. You guys check them out because it holds so much. You'll never lose your stuff. All right, on to Sensitive Not Soft, first episode of 2026. I wanted to break down, why does ADHD look so different from person to person? Why do some people feel like it is a disability? Why do some people feel like it's a total superpower? And what creates this? Is it luck of the draw? Is it parenting? Is it environment? Is it food? Like, what is this? What is the factor that makes some people feel one way about it and others feel a different way? This is what I want to break down today because it's the beginning of the year and this is like the beginning part of understanding ADHD. So I felt like contextually this all went together. Now, the way that I decided to break this up so that I could tell this to you without it being some long drawn out thing that we probably won't take a lot of the information from, because ADHD brains don't like that. And if you're watching this, you probably have ADHD. I decided to get a bunch of the questions that I got in 2025 that had to do with this subject and then answer those so that way we are chunking and it is easier for me to get this information out because it's easier for me to do it that way. But then it's easier for you guys to also interpret it and take it in because I'm kind of doing it in these little chunks. Let me know what you think if you like this style better. One of the first questions we came up, and I had to write these down. There's no way I'd remember because that whole ADHD thing. Is ADHD something you're born with or is it caused by environment? This is a great number one question. Both. It is both. Step one with ADHD is it's genetic. Did mom or dad or both of us give us any of these genetic traits? We know of about over 180 genetic traits that are specific to ADHD. Some are specific to autism also, but we know of 180 plus of these that you could possibly get dealt. Step one is, how many were you dealt? Which ones are they? Like the amount of them and which ones they are is really going to be a big deciding factor, number one, because if you don't inherit the traits, then there's no ADHD. But it starts with genetic traits. And step two is going to be environment. Now, environment is big because environment is a twofold section, because there's the environment when we're in utero or in mom's belly. And then there's the environment of growing up, being outside of it. Once we have these genes, that environment when we're in mom's belly and we're in utero, if that is a stressful environment, that will shape these very sensitive ADHD genes to go one way. And that's one thing, keep in mind about these ADHD genes, these traits, is that they're very sensitive, meaning they're easily moldable. They can easily go one way or the other. If we have a lot of these traits and we're in utero and it's a very stressful situation, meaning maybe mom has a lot of external stressors. Maybe the relationship is stressful. Maybe work is stressful. Maybe finances are stressful because that she's not eating enough or she's making poor choices or, maybe around a smoking environment. All of these things will decide what happens to those traits and will mold them, express them. Is one way we refer to it, is how do they express themselves? Those things will make them express themselves one way, just like if mom is eating really healthy, nutritious food, she's getting a lot of good sleep, she's, not around smoke, she's drinking a lot of water, all these things will also make them express in another way while in utero. That's number one. And then the second part is once we're born, from zero, day one, all the way up until, our 20s, we are our most neuroplastic. Our brain is able to take things on and we're able to learn at a very rapid pace, which means that these genes can be molded in very rapid ways also. That next step, if we are feeding our kids bad stuff, if they don't have a lot of activity, if they're in very stressful homes, all of these things will then have a impact on the way that these genes express into the future. So kind of a side note is that two side notes. One, everything isn't based on mom. So just because we're in mom's belly, that dads, fathers, we can put a lot of that stress on mom. So we can be the result of that also. But our genes, what we're giving through, I don't know, can you say this on YouTube on, the little swimmers? don't know if you can say that word. Sure, you could, but I don't want to take the risk. That is going to influence it. Also, dad, your health, those things will also influence it. So keep that in mind. This isn't just a mom thing. When we talk about, is this just hereditary? Is this stress? What is this? It's all these things. It's the food dyes. It's the not getting enough sleep. It's the school schedules. All of these things influence ADHD. Oh, I remember what it was now. It is parenting. I see a lot of these Facebook posts recently that say ADHD isn't caused by parenting, which is not. I'm going over the cause of it now. But the way we parent will absolutely directly influence the result of ADHD. It will influence it will not state whether or not that kid has ADHD, but it will grab it by the shoulders and tell it which way ADHD is going. And so parents, our parenting style has a big influence on how our children's ADHD is going to express later on. So we got to keep that in mind. I hope that answers question one. Let's see what the next one is. All right. So the next question is, if ADHD is genetic, why does it look so different from person to person? I might have answered it in the last question a little bit, or at least hinted at it, but ADHD is so different from person to person because there's over 180 traits. So we don't just get dealt all of those. Those don't just mimic each other when you have ADHD across the board. You're going to get some of those. You could get 50, you could get 75, you can get any amount of them in different orders. That's going to be number one. Two, when we're in our mom's belly, that environment that we are exposed to and that mom's exposed to and that, everybody around her, dad is all exposed to, that can't be replicated exactly from kid to kid. Even if you have two kids in the same home, you can't replicate that environment. And that's one thing we hear a lot, or I've heard a lot, is both of them are raised in the same home. How come it's so different one or the other? It's many times a way that we kind of measure it. We can't, because the way we parent one kid doesn't look like another, right? Our first kids, we tend to be a little bit more helicoptery with. We're like, don't do that. And our second kids are like, do whatever, I don't care. We're not so over the top. So that parenting right there, that step 3 of the environmental factors is going to make ADHD look different. When kids are in the womb, right? When we're in that second phase of the environmental factor, that doesn't look the same either. For first kids, a lot of times we were broke. We were younger. We didn't have the stuff. On our second kids, a lot of times we had our lives figured out much more. We had more money. We had less stress, or vice versa, right? Those just don't look the same. And then even in step 1, having the kid, we're not giving the same amount of genes to each kid. And so we can't use that like they were born in the same house, or they grew up in the same house, and so why doesn't it look the same, or whatever? Because we can't replicate those conditions. And so if we can't replicate those conditions, then everybody's ADHD is going to be very much like a snowflake. It's going to be very different, and we have to support it very differently, and we have to look at it a little bit differently. We have to all of it is very much different. And so this is why it looks so much different, because in all 3 of those places, for every child across the world, it is going to look extremely different, which means ADHD is going to be expressed extremely differently. I hope that helps. I didn't go on a weird tangent that takes off. I do that a lot because I don't script this. I just read the questions and give it to you guys. So the third question: does pregnancy and early development actually affect ADHD? It does. It really does. And this is where the effect is going to be the most, is in that second stage, but first stage of environment. So in utero, being born premature, weight, any of these things are stressors. They're harder on the body. Wow, I can't. Because it's hard on the body, this causes stress, this causes inflammation. And this, again, is going to influence those ADHD traits because they're so sensitive. It doesn't take a lot to influence them. And if there's a lot of something, we'll probably get a lot of influence. And so if we have a baby that's born prematurely, that is born underweight, or any of these, because of those, whatever is happening on the back end that's causing that stress, that is absolutely going to affect ADHD. Now, does it mean it's going to affect it negatively? No, it could affect it positively, but there will be an effect from it because these genes are so sensitive. That's the point, is that in all of these phases, that doesn't mean like we have to have been in this big traumatic event. It doesn't mean that. They're very sensitive and they're easily manipulated. That's something we really have to keep in mind. Why do some kids with ADHD seem to thrive while others seem to struggle? I guess without going too deep into it, is if we take all the stuff I just talked about and we say somebody was born with Doesn't matter how many ADHD genes, right? They were born with ADHD. And then in that first phase of environment, second phase of environment, if there was a lot of stress and there was very little supports, this a lot of times what we see leads to a more struggling feeling with ADHD, as opposed to kids who had less stress, who had more supports. We tend to see them thrive a lot more with ADHD. Now, that doesn't mean that because you thrive, you're just like everything's great all the time. That doesn't mean that. It means that you had control. You knew how to get yourself in a position to where when you read, you could comprehend, and people knew your strengths and they used your strengths to get you ahead. And you were recognized for those things, as opposed to kids who didn't have that support. They were more treated like a neurotypical. They were forced into doing things like neurotypicals. And so they didn't have the supports. They didn't know how to support themselves. And this can lead to a lot more failures, a lot more interactions with teachers and parents and loved ones where it's like, you're not doing it right. And that's wrong. And why do you think that way? And all of those interactions can end up manipulating or influencing ADHD in a very negative way, and in a way that they don't have a way to thrive in life. It would be very hard to become a CEO when you have very little confidence and you don't believe that your way is right, right? Just something small like that. This is one of the biggest reasons why we see some kids just fly with it and others not. On a side note of that, we tend to see ADHD as such a disability because there's such a bigger category of adults, kids, teens with ADHD who feel like it's a disability than those who feel like it's a superpower. One of the reasons is because 1 in 9 people are born with ADHD, which means that if we don't have somebody to learn from, then we can't watch and learn from. It's very hard to learn how to manage this. If mom or dad has it or both, and they didn't learn how to support and manage it, they just kind of push through. They're going to have a very hard time teaching their children how to manage this. That's going to lump a whole lot of people into that category of it feeling like it's such a disability, as opposed to the very few people who have kind of figured it out and got the supports they needed, and they feel like it's a superpower. And it's also one of the reasons why I do what I do, because I want to try to flip that percentage. I want to try to get more information like this out so that people over here can start wandering over this way and feeling like, wow, I know how to support myself and I know how to make this more of a superpower instead of feel like such a disability in my life. Is ADHD really a learning issue, or is it something else? Cool. All right. So we're going to touch on a few things with ADHD here. Um, ADHD can have learning disabilities and issues that come with it. So a lot of times with ADHD, we're going to see things like dyslexia that comes with it. And we're going to see, along with the low dopamine theory and the low neurochemicals, dysgraphia, we're going to see, I can't think of any more now. But there are comorbidities that can go with this that can make learning a lot harder. On top of, if you didn't have the supports, if you don't know that, like, how to there's a lot of things with this that if you don't already have your supports and then you have a dyslexia on top of it, that is going to make it a learning disability. If you have low enough dopamine, this could be a learning disability, because dopamine is one of the neurotransmitters we utilize to create memories and to learn and to do all these things. And one of the things we know about ADHD is that we have lower baseline amounts of dopamine. Because we have lower amounts of those neurochemicals, I mean, you could argue that you're already kind of at a disadvantage as is. And if you don't have something in your environment to boost up that dopamine and to really work with those neurochemicals to get those like just bubbling and baiting your brain so that you can remember and you can take on learning and do all these things, it may not. You very much could feel like you have a learning disability. For me, I don't know that I had a learning disability growing up, but I had trouble learning. That was hard because in certain situations, I learned very well and very fast. And in other situations, it was like the words were just bouncing off my head and hitting the desk in front of me. What I found out was that if I wasn't naturally interested in it, I wasn't going to pick it up fast. But I also knew that there were some things that I had to learn. We just have to learn these things. We don't get to just bypass them and say, I have ADHD, I can't learn it. Then we have to take our environment and make our environment interesting so that our environment creates the neurochemistry for us to do the learning. So, is it a learning disability? There are many times it can be between the traits you inherit, the supports you do or don't have. It can be. It can be a learning disability, but it's not always a learning disability. ADHD is not always one thing. The one thing ADHD always is the extremes. You're always either really good or really bad, or really good or really bad. And you're not really good at everything. You're not really bad at everything. It just feels like it's always in between. There's no just in the middle area where you can just get by and do what you need to do. That's kind of my opinion on, is it an actual learning disability? What do parents get wrong when trying to help kids with ADHD? I don't know that there's things that parents get wrong. Parents get a lot of things right. I haven't met a lot of parents who just aren't trying. And I think if you're not, trying to participate in putting up supports and you're putting an effort for the kid, as long as you're doing those things, that parents aren't doing anything wrong. I think what parents need more of and what everybody needs more of is education about this, because when we understand this, we know what to do. We know how to create supports. We know how to approach this. We know how to avoid the meltdowns, and we know how to give them a life and teach them how to thrive in life. So to me, it's not a educational thing. To me, it's not what parents aren't doing. This is more of an educational thing. There's not a lot of people talking about it. The people who are talking about it a lot of times aren't diving deep enough for parents to really understand and take that information, put it into their household and go, oh, I see how this helps out, or I see why this is happening. So, I guess if I were to say one thing parents maybe that we could do better with our kids who have ADHD, and that would be being the leader. Many times we're looking at our kids and we're like, God, I just wish you would get outside and get off video games and move more. But many parents aren't doing that themselves. They're not going to the gym. They're not going outside and going on walks. They themselves aren't healthy. We don't want our kids to chase after sugar and eat all these carbs. But then as parents, we're doing that. We want our kids to get sleep, yet we don't have a sleep. So my point is that before we can ask them to do that, we have to be modeling that ourselves, because they're not the only ones in this house with the ADHD. Mom or dad, one of the two, are dealing with it too, and either they know about it or they don't know about it, but these cards were handed. And so if we aren't modeling it, we surely cannot ask our kids to model it, because these little ADHD babies, we are contextual, right? And if contextually they're like, hold on a second, mom and dad are asking me to do these things, but they literally don't do these things. One, they're going to kind of call you out on it in their head. They're like, you don't do it. Why should I? That makes them not want to do it. Two, obviously, when the person asking you to do it doesn't do it themselves. Like if your boss is always asking you to do things that you know they can't do, you're not going to want to do it either. You're going to have a bad taste in your mouth about your boss. So doing things to model the behavior, number one, because then if we're modeling the behavior, then we can create a safe space to invite them into this and show them how fun it can be. Because working out, eating good, anything you're doing to support your ADHD a lot of times isn't fun. It isn't fun to do because we're learning how neurotypicals do it. But if mom or dad are learning how to do it who aren't a neurotypical, who have ADHD, then we can invite that kid in, our child in who also has ADHD, and teach them how to do it in a fun ADHD way that makes sense to them. And then this will make them want to do it more. Yeah, I don't think it's anything we're doing wrong. We just got to do more probably of like the modeling behavior and learning more about it. Guys, that's all I have time for today. I hope this helped out. I hope you take something from this. And if you did, please leave a comment. Tell me what you took from this. I'd love to hear from you. And if there's something you want me to cover a little bit more of, definitely put in the comments. I want to hear more about it. If you or somebody you love is struggling with ADHD, go to my website, www.adamtristan.com. You can download one of my free ebooks and let me help you. Like there's one way to get to help support ourselves and build support for ourselves and our babies, and that is to be educated. So go download one of my ebooks. Let's get educated and let's help these kids out. Y'all have an amazing day.